My name is Spencer Walsh, and for my English project today, I'd like to start it by talking to my grandmother, Maria Walsh. She was born in Germany in the year 1938. She had humble upbringings, like most people in Germany at the time, but luckily her life wasn't as hard as it could have been, because she was born Christian. She immigrated from Germany to New York after 21 years of hard work, loss, and poverty. She never knew her father, but got onto the ship to New York with a loving sister and uncle waiting for her, and the support of her mother and brother behind her, who came soon after. After she arrived, she gravitated toward the big city quickly, describing Times Square as, quote, like she died and went to heaven. My grandmother then settled down to Astoria, Queens, where she and her sister worked as hairdressers and seamstresses, respectively. One day, she went with another girlfriend and two male friends to New Jersey for a weekend trip. As the weekend wore on, my grandmother quickly began to fall for one of the guys there, even pretending to know how to water ski to impress him. It turned out that other guy would soon become my grandfather. They married, and by 1969, 9 years after she came to America, she gave birth to my father, the third of 3 kids she would have. She raised them well, even after my grandfather was confined to a wheelchair after a skiing accident. As they had kids of their own, she became Omi. Her mom had been Oma, the traditional German name for a grandmother, to my father. Over the years, she actually learned to water ski and still does it almost every day down where she lives in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at the age of 80, and is the most loving, healthy, and overall happiest person I've ever met, and an inspiration to all those around her. How did she do it? I decided to ask her myself. All right, so one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you today was that you kind of have a child experience that is really remarkable, especially to those who were born in like a more freer and more prosperous country like America. Like me, I wouldn't really know like what growing up was like. So just can you like tell everyone what was life like growing up in Germany in that time period?
Well, I was born in Germany right on the end of the war, beginning of the war in 1938. But then my father was away in the war, so I never met him. He was gone, shipped wherever. He was was a soldier, and he had to go wherever he had to go. And when I was really young, I remember it was very scary because when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old, that's when I can remember. So that was, during the end of the war, and I remember airplanes flying over, and we had to go into a bomb shelter, and there was food was impossible to get unless you would have your own. Unless you have, we had a backyard, we would grow our own vegetables in our house. In the basement, we had animals, we had pigs, chicken, goat, and all this, the food that you can eat. So to me, we never had pets because we only had livestock that, provided food. So that's and it was scary for me, it was at least, the airplanes flying over, the English or the British or whatever, to bomb the towns. But the airplanes, they usually bombed the railroad station or something in particular. But anyway, it was very scary as a child. And then when I went to school, my first year in kindergarten, then the war was over, but then there was no food to be had either. You had to grow your own. So that is the earliest memories I have of the time.
So who were like the people, like whether it be your friends or your family members, that kind of helped you get through the tough times when you were growing up?
Ah, God, it was only my mother, but she was always there. I mean, we were always perfect. We could never do anything wrong. So she was always on our side. But that was the only one. And then I had grandparents. They weren't that helpful either. My grandfather was very tough and he was not that social. But my mother was the only one. And then I had siblings, my older sister, She was 3 years older than I. She had to help my mother a lot, and we all had our chores to do. And then, so my mother was the only really influence in my childhood. I never knew my father, so I only had my mother, and then my grandparents, they sort of were in the background, but they weren't that much help, not to my mother at least, or us.
Were you kind of able to like go like see friends or like hang out with friends, or did you just kind of always have to like help your family?
Oh, well, no, we had, first of all, when I once went to kindergarten, my mother or some relative or neighbor would always take us to the church where there was a kindergarten. We had sisters, and they weren't exactly friendly either. And we would go to kindergarten, and we had some time in kindergarten, and then they would provide some food for you, like, cookies or milk or something. I don't know. I don't remember, but that was when I was maybe 5, right? And then I went to school. But when I went to school, that was great, because I had neighbors. The street I lived on, every house had a child my age or younger or older, and we would walk to school. It was maybe, to walk to school, maybe it would take, I don't know, first we had to walk to church, and then we would go to school. So we had to walk maybe 2 miles or 3 miles to go to school, and then we meet all the kids walking, and that sort of was regular social activity. You meet your friends and the kids in your class, and boys and girls, and we walking to school, because we didn't have any buses or anything like that. So we walked to school, and then going home from school, that was even more fun. After school, we would go and walk through meadows and around rivers, and we were supposed to be home after school by 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Sometimes we were really late, and then you get my mother be angry because I was too late for this or too late for that. But we had lots of neighbors and friends and schoolmates, and that part was great.
Well, that's good to know that you kind of had that like community support to like help you get through like some like having to like grow food and all that stuff.
We were kids. We were helping each other, and that was really nice. We didn't have much. We didn't have bicycles, or we didn't have toys, or we didn't have any of that. But we had camaraderie. We had neighbors and boys and girls. And then we had a little forest, maybe another quarter-mile north of the street I lived on, and we would go into the forest and climb trees, and if we could get away. But a lot of times we had to work also. But we did, yes. We had as kids, we had fun with one another. We had boys up the street and girls. It was really fun.
All right, yeah. So that definitely seems like it probably help you like with going through the community. And even though the conditions in Germany at the time were not good, leaving your home and heading to a foreign country at the age of, I believe, 22. Right? Was it 22?
21, 21. 22,
yeah. It's definitely not really an easy decision to make. So why did you decide to go to New York and to America?
Well, my last year in school, I was going to it's sort of a trade school college, and I got my uncle, my mother's brother. He lived in the U.S. He came to the U.S. in 1936, and he was sponsored by his aunt, who was she came in 1914. So I had relatives over here, so they sponsored me to come over. And then, because of the hardship of my mother, that she didn't have to provide, and so anyway, I got my green card within 3 months when I was 20 years old to come to the U.S., live with my uncle, have a job, and he provided, he helped me have a job as well, and so that was also very helpful to have relatives over here. And during the war, my uncle over here, he sent packages with food and coffee, so we were getting help from him all along. And so that's when I came over here. But everything in Germany when I was growing up, the houses were bombed. There was no food. I mean, it was tough. It's like living in a third world country. You couldn't get this, you couldn't get that, and I mean, it was very difficult. But then I was privileged in the way that I had relatives over here, and that was the door to my freedom. And
Yeah, so really, that definitely doesn't make sense. But what was your mind? What was going through your mind throughout your journey to New York?
to come to New York?
Yeah, yeah. Were you like
Oh,
nervous?
say that again.
Were you like nervous or confident or?
Oh no, I was I don't. Oh, I was excited. I thought that was going to happen. I mean, I had a passage on a ship going from Bremerhaven in Germany to New York. It was a small German ship, and that was in 1960. And there were lots of immigrants on there. It wasn't just me. Lots of young people. Oh, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to get over here and leave my hometown because it was just too much, there was too much poverty. Everybody was struggling for food and jobs, and, it was tough. So for me, I was excited to get out of Germany as fast as I could. I was absolutely the happiest person in the world to get the hell out of there.
I'm sure though when you arrived, it was really quite hectic and really kind of a new world.
My God, you can't believe it.
Yeah.
It was exciting coming with the ship coming into the harbor and seeing the Statue of Liberty. You can't imagine how happy I was. I was so excited, and then my uncle and my aunt, they came and took me home, and then they provided a job for me, and it was fantastic. I always say I thought I died and went to heaven. It was the best thing in the world ever. So that was great. And of course, then I had worked in a cosmetic company, and I had to, my English wasn't that good. I had to learn it, but it was all a pleasure coming from where I was with all the bombed out cities on train stations and all that stuff, and Germany was rebuilding itself, and it was a mess. It was a mess. And my mother, she lost her husband in the war, so she was all stressed out, and I was just happy as I could be to get out of Dodge or out of Buren. So it was the best thing ever happened to me, ever, ever, ever.
How are you able to find comfort and really settle into your new life in America?
Oh, well, like I said, I had relatives. They showed me around. I met people. I went to, joined a German-American club in New York City on 86th Street. I learned how to manipulate their subways, and then I met people. I would go out with them after work, and I just it was so easy to compare to the struggle we had at home. It was really easy to meet people in New York, young people, and go out with friends. And I had friends invited, girls I worked with, they invited me to away for the weekend. I found the American people were so generous. There were people from New York. There were people from Long Island. There were young girls from Ireland. There were some people that escaped Ireland for one reason or another. And so it was just a whole mixture of people that you met, and I fitted right in. I loved it. I was never unhappy over here. The only time, it was tough in Germany. And then, of course, I had my mother, and she was always supporting us. She was a sweetheart. And and I once I came over here, life was a beach. It was great.
Yeah, I'm sure it was probably compared to like what you were facing in
You
Germany.
bet,
Yeah.
you bet.
How
It was fantastic.
how important was it for you to get your mother and your brother to come